with the fellowship. So I have a few questions that we're going to go through, and we're going to start with the personal awards first and then move into the design awards. And you probably got this in the mail. I got mine, I think, last week, and it talks about the design awards jury for this year and important dates. So if you haven't received it, look for it. So you see right here on the back, it says registration is open. Early bird registration ends February 10th, and registration closes early March on the 7th. And then they'll be announced, of course, in June, and the awards will be given at the convention in August, which is in Tampa. Submission deadline is March the 17th, and that is for AIA Florida's Design and Honor Awards. And then, of course, National has their own separate deadline. So we're going to be looking at both. Lourdes, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Certainly. Hi, I'm Lourdes Solera, and I am from Miami, an architect from MC Harry and Associates. And I've been involved in AIA for many years. Like Joyce, I was honored with the gold medal from AIA Florida this past summer, which was very exciting. And Brooke did something on me. She says, well, tell us like something about your awards that you've gotten. I was like, oh shoot, I don't remember. I mean, I do, but so I had to go find my list. And part of the interest of the committee was really, there's a lot of very important people out there that should be getting awards. And the first one I got really was for being a good volunteer at my local chapter. So it was the President's Award. And then, then I got like a public service for our chapter. Miami has a silver medal award, which is kind of our highest award. And then before I knew it, Architect of the Year. And then of course I was honored with the gold medal. So I've gotten a few awards, but I, didn't really think about how many they were until Brooke put it on me. So now Joyce, it's your turn.
I think my journey was very similar to Lourdes's, except I used to live in England. And so I actually didn't get back to the US until 2004 and became active in 2007 in the chapter, my local chapter, not the state level. And so, again, once I did start getting involved, I was getting similar awards, a President's Award from the local chapter, and then our Medal of Honor for, being a good member. I got that one, and then I got involved with the state, and I got after I became president for a year, I did decide to apply for the design award, the Medal of Honor for Design, and I got that first. I got my FAIA first, thanks to Lourdes, who had already had hers and was advising me, and then I got the gold medal in 2022. So I think Lourdes and I, yeah, we both got a lot of these awards. And on the design, we're going to talk today about design awards as well. So I've done quite a lot of that, and I've been on the juries as well. So I know from both sides sort of what you need to do and how I can help you get there to win your own awards. So, Brooke.
Okay, so our first question, we're starting with honor awards, is why is it important to apply for honor awards, and how can they help your career?
So I have to say it's important. We are very bad at sometimes congratulating ourselves for our hard work, and women particularly, but overall in humans. So I think taking the time to say, you know what, I've done a lot, right? And I should really go for this. It kind of makes you think of all the things you've done that maybe you didn't think were as important or as impactful, and in fact they were. And as Joyce and I said, our first series of awards was really just being a good active volunteer, in which our component leaders, thought this person gets an award, and it was kind of nice to get an award and have your name called out, and you're like, oh, it feels really good. Sometimes we have to toot our own horn. I know people that have refused to submit for fellowship because they want people to just give it to them because they're the best thing since sliced bread. But people don't know what you've done. So you need to put it out there. You need to, because some people know you well and they don't really know everything, other things you did. And so I think I don't know that I can tangibly say it has helped my career, but it does help your profile, your visibility, and people start to recognize you, your employers, your friends, your colleagues start to go, hey, if this person is getting recognized by a group of sometimes strangers, sometimes their colleagues because if they're from your chapter, or your component president that gives you a president's award, they start to say, hey, this is a go-getter. This is a person who's willing to sort of kind of put themselves out there and help others, because obviously my awards are all about service. But the same with design, it's like it really is. Sometimes you have to tell people, they just don't know everything you've done. And so although we have to pass that threshold of, gee, it seems like it's aggrandizing. It's not. It's really sharing what you've done and letting people agree that, hey, you're really cool, to use that sort of term.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree with Lourdes on that. And I'd like to kind of reinforce something she said. Last summer, I had the privilege of meeting with one of your colleagues who may or may not be on this call, on this Zoom, I don't know. And she asked me if I would help her to look at her, whether she was ready to apply for fellowship. And just spending just over an hour with her, it was just like, yeah, of course you are, and she didn't understand, and I didn't know all those things about her, right? And so it was a real wake-up call for me, like, this person has a lot going on, and it wasn't put together yet, but once she told the story in words, and I made her write it down as we were doing it. Like, once she told the story, she was like, oh, wow, look at all those things I did. And no one had ever sat with her and done that. So that was really important. And I always feel like since I got started with AI Florida, my motto has always been communicating value. And that's about the value of the architect. And so I feel like, even though it's validation for yourself when you win an award, it's also important that other people, like, it could be useful to let other people know outside of our profession that you've won the awards, because every time you win an award at any level, if you bring that to someone's attention, they're saying, oh, that architect, because nobody knows what architects do. But once you bring it to their attention, and so I'm saying, don't be afraid to tell people that you've won these awards, because it raises awareness of architects, and it's always contributing to your story, and then the story of the architect as well, and then the profession as a whole. So communicating the value of the architect is always my goal. And so if anyone I know wins an award, I'm always like, okay, how are you going to tell other people that you've got this award, so that it becomes, it's just the rising boat thing, right? So all of us kind of benefit from that.
And you'd be surprised how many people do pay attention to those social media posts, particularly LinkedIn and things like that. I've had clients that I just met and like, oh, congratulations, you got an award. And, it's been a couple of months since it was announced, and I'm sitting there and like, what are you talking about? Oh, okay. So it's sometimes it's great, kind of to do that.
And I wouldn't say it's ever led to a project for me. I don't know about you, Lourdes. I've never gotten a project from winning an honor award, but it does give kudos. So when people go to your website, when they're looking at it, they're like, oh, this person's for real. Like, this is a good architect. There's, so there is a lot of value in winning these awards and applying for them.
Okay, next one. Is there a balance between quantity and quality of awards? So should you be selective in what you apply, or go after all of them? What's your thought or strategy or recommendation on that?
Too much, what did you say? Too much publicity is never bad.
And I think you're asking the wrong girls here, right? The two that keep asking, like, we're putting it out there, and getting.
I don't think it's bad to go for awards, because it even your chances of getting it are depending on your story and who you're up against and who the jury is. So to be selective is to be kind of not helping yourself, right? Because it just might be just the luck of the draw maybe, or simply, you know, you've got a lot to show. I mean, I remember as I'm looking at my list, one I didn't put up, I was nominated by an outside charity to submit because I was a volunteer at another organization. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really nice. So sometimes it comes from other places. I don't think you need to be selective. This isn't like, you know, I'm going to pick this client because they pay well and they're nice versus the one that pays late or never. I don't think there's a downside to do
Yeah.
it, and it keeps you on top of what you're doing, and maybe you realize, oh, I should do more of this, or I really enjoyed this, so let me do more of this or something.
Yeah, I think the cons of it is like it's very time consuming to do it. And you know, it could bring disappointment as well. But I think we can all learn through our disappointment. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think that if we'll talk later about like when are you ready and if you deserve it. But if you deserve it, then you know, definitely if you feel that that's the one for you, you should definitely go for it. And then once you apply for awards too, it really like doing a fellowship, which is, I think Lourdes and I both did our fellowship before the gold medal submission. And once you do your fellowship, all you like your world is in order because you had to put it in order to get your fellowship. It's a big deal. And so applying for other awards becomes easier because you have this you know, bulk of information that you can pull from then. So yeah, why not?
And
Right.
and to talk about the fellowship, which is, you know, kind of one of the things we're ticking on. It's important to just collect the data, right? You know, even if you think you're not ready, it's important to keep a, you know, in our days, it was a box with things that had our name on it. Now it's, you know, files on our computer. So it's important to keep track of that so that when it's time to assemble a package, you have it. Oh, I did this, I did that, and the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes you surprise yourself. It's like, oh, I didn't realize how much stuff I'd done when I filled out the package for, you know, the gold medal. I was like, oh my God, I texted Becky. I go, I got to find myself another hobby. I've spent the last 25 years doing stuff for AIA. I need a new hobby. And she goes, don't you dare. So,
Well,
Yeah.
Lourdes, yes, you are not allowed to get another hobby. But actually, now that you've brought up fellowship, a couple of attendees have put some questions in the chat. So if you don't mind, can I pose those to you? We have one. She says she's been an architect for many years and has won several design awards. She'd like to apply for fellowship. How does she know she's a good candidate? How does she get started?
I think that so when you apply for fellowship, I'm not sure who this is or other than the design awards, but if you're going to apply for design awards, you have to really do excel in design. So that is the hardest category to get your fellowship in because there are different categories when you apply for fellowship. And design is always like the most sought after. That's what people really want. But it actually becomes very, very difficult because you're competing against, you know, some of the country's very best architects. And so you have to have a lot of design awards. Yeah, and it's probably easier if you apply for something else that you have contributed to the profession and then back it up with design awards. That's kind of how I did mine. That was sort of mine again, when I did my fellowship, was about communicating value. That's how I got my fellowship. That was my reason that I did get my fellowship. But it was also backed up with my own work that had received design awards. So I don't know more, but
well,
yeah,
I do
you should
know a
think
little
about
bit
those.
more. I do know a little bit more about design awards because I had the honor of serving as a juror of the fellows last year, and my 1 year is up, give or take. So I'm you know, allowed to say more. Design awards, as Joy says, is hard. And it's not so hard, if that makes any sense. It's hard in the sense that you have to show your breadth. And part of what the jury's looking for, it isn't about you must have national, state, and local. It helps because that means different level of your colleagues have acknowledged it. But several people I saw got design awards without necessarily having gotten a national award. What they're looking for is really impact. And this applies to all the categories. what is the level of impact beyond your circle? If your circle is just your local component and nobody's seen your work, but your local component and your local crowd, it may be fantastic work, but they're looking for impact outside of the circle, that generic term that we use all the time, the ripple effect. And it's very hard sometimes to realize where your ripple effect is. So you have to sort of really look to see, okay, my work, I got awards, but it got published here, and then you know, and you have to sort of craft a story. Maybe, you know, your team that got the design awards, they you know, have moved on to those places, and that design philosophy you created in your projects gets now translated to Minnesota, and I'm making sort of the storyline. And so that's very important. And the jury looks at it very holistically, right? So it's not just, we're not judging on the quality of the design award, because that's already been judged by somebody else. We're looking at how whole that package is, that it's not that you sat in your office and you did all this work and you got all the design awards, but you didn't share it, you didn't teach people how to do it, you know, that's not going to help you, because they're trying to see that it is something that the rest of the country, the rest of the world has had. And that's, I know it sounds grandiose, but it's not as difficult. You just sort of have to look, you know, did you get invited to present your work in, I don't know, Ottawa or wherever, and then 300 people attended, and all of a sudden your design is being spread outside of your circle, if that makes any sense. It is a hard one, but you just sort of have to think of in terms of, how do I show how my design awards, my design has impacted the community? Did I do something different? And I remember last year I was looking at some design awards, and oh my God, the work's spectacular. I was just like, that's it, they should give it. And the rest of the jurors who had more experience looked at me and they're like, yeah, but it's only in their little bubble, right? Their little bubble of wherever they live, they're doing this phenomenal work, but nobody but their bubble knows about it. So, and it was like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it that way. So think about how big your bubble is. The bigger the bubble, the better. You know, the bigger the ripple. You know, and it's kind of a tried and true statement, but the bigger the ripple, it's kind of how it works.
So
And you might have to wait. You might have to sort of like keep, you know, finding ways to share your work, so to speak.
So it looks like we have a few women interested in fellowship, so this is good. And maybe even when you do win an AI Florida Design Award, you can make sure to put that it was an international jury that selected that project as we keep going internationally. But a couple more questions from attendees. Thank you for putting these in, if you don't mind taking these. Another one is, what's your best advice on how to find a good sponsor for fellowship?
I think I'll take that one to start, because Lourdes was my sponsor, and I just didn't know that many female fellows, and I knew that she definitely believed in fellowship, and she had worked hard to get her own and was encouraging many other people. And so I think you need to find that person that you can communicate with, because you have to work with them very closely, and they unfortunately have to listen to you and understand who you are and all the things that you've done. And so you really want a good listener, and someone that can be your mentor for sure. And Lourdes was great. So she knows how grateful I am.
Well, thank you. I think you have to find the person that also questions you, right? Why?
That was Lourdes for sure.
So what? That's cool. So what?
Yeah.
What made it so special? My object was Lendy Institute, which, believe it or not, does not have as many applicants as some of the other categories. Because, you know, there's a new chapter president in every component every year. So what did you do with it? And I'm using my particular object. So you need to find a sponsor that you can trust to be your best advocate, your worst advocate, if that makes any sense, to question everything you're saying, who's willing to take the time to say, that's great, but how do how did that make an impact? And then they're doing it with objective and kindness, not to, beat you down, because that's not really the intent. And you could tell, again, having sat on that jury, you would read these sponsor letters and you'd go, this person really didn't know their own person. And we had to we couldn't say on the review comments, find a new sponsor, because that would just not be right. But it was like, oh my God, so you have to think of somebody. It doesn't have to be a big name person. They don't have to be the world famous architect. They have to be the person who will challenge you and make sure, because the first thing we read is that sponsor letter. And that sponsor letter is the one that's going to pique my interest. And they're going to say, this sounds like a really awesome person. I want to know more. Right. And then they open the whole thing as more. And it was very sometimes disappointing. And sometimes they even got the work, even though the sponsor letter was kind of crappy, because it's not just the first page. But find somebody who is willing to take the time. To go back to that question of the cons, it is the time for going for awards. It is the time it takes. So you want to find somebody that's not just going to give you 5 minutes once a month to say, yeah, looks great, go for it. You want to find somebody who's, it doesn't have to be your best friend. It doesn't have to be somebody in your local component. It has to be somebody who's willing to give it to you. But it's somebody that knows you. Don't get somebody you just met down the street. Ignacio, I remember, had asked me, I was also his sponsor. He had asked me several years before, and I had just gotten to know him. And I said, Ignacio, I don't know you well enough, because I know how I am. As Nati like to say, I'm the pain in the ass, sponsor who's going to send you texts, where is it, those kind of things. Not all sponsors are like that. I know I'm a pain in the ass. But once I got to know him, then it was a lot easier for me to say, yes, I will do it, kind of stuff. So make sure it's somebody who knows you well and is willing to take the time.
Yeah, and I can honestly say Lourdes made me rewrite my entire event. I mean, my entire package. And thank God we were having a hurricane that weekend, so we were all locked up, and I had enough power to get through the hurricane and get my submission finished. And if that wouldn't have happened, that hurricane, I never would have been able to rewrite it like she had requested. And so it was painful, but she definitely knew what she was doing. And this is before she was on the jury. So yeah.
And I'm going to interject briefly in case you're either an associate member or you're a young architect and you may be a little bit lost and not as familiar with the fellowship as others. It's never too early to start thinking about it. You may not be able to qualify yet, and that you have not been a licensed architect and member of AIA for 10 years, but you can't wait till you hit your 10-year mark to start thinking about it. It starts now. It starts before your license. It starts earlier. The other thing that you may be a bit lost in is when we talk about objects and design, there's different paths to the fellowship. So you can do service to the Institute, AIA, so work through AIA. There's design, there's a category for being an educator. So there's different pathways, and you determine which pathway applies to you. And once you make that determination, that's kind of your focus, and that's where you kind of build your stock. So if you're not understanding that that's what they're referring to is which path is right for you, and it's based on where's your talent, where's your interest, and different objectives or pathways are going to look a little bit different. And that's where hopefully your sponsor can help identify with you and say, this is best for you.
And I'd say that kind of logic applies even to all kind of awards. If you're a young architect or a young associate, most of our chapters have associate member awards. You start collecting the data. It's never too late to collect. One of the questions I see it on the screen is what kind of information should I collect when applying for fellowship? Collect everything. In today's world in which digitally you can save everything, and in the kitchen sink, pictures, everything like that. The best advice I got was from Jaime Canaves many years ago, which was put it in a box, and anything that you've done, anything that put it in there. But it applies to any awards, right? As Brooke says, you may not be ready yet to do 10 years, but there's other awards that your components, if you're involved in your component, can do if you're involved in other organizations. They have awards. You collect all that data and you just, you can organize it later, and that's, kind of, and all of these awards, at least in AIA, have samples. So for example, if you're going for fellowship, they post on the website the best stuff. The jury is asked every year to pick best stuff in each of the categories, and they leave them on the website, and look at them, not to compare yourself to them, because that's the worst thing you can do, but look at them to compare, to think of how they told their story. How did they talk about this and talk about that? And when I did mine, I actually downloaded samples of all of the categories, because publications is not something I don't write, so how do I do publications? Because there's different categories you got to meet, within the things. And so I looked at how other people did it, and I was like, oh, okay, I did a little short article for this, you're not stretching the truth, but you're kind of packaging in a way that fits what it's asking. So use those as samples. The same for young architects. Somebody asked me earlier today this year to be, write the reference letter. And I said, make sure you ask them to give you samples. AIA National will have the samples of everything that's successful in it. Let's say, that Joyce, you want to see Joyce's package. You can request that from AIA National. And they will share it even if it's not posted on the website. AIA Florida actually hosts, when I was the regional rep, I collected as many as I could from our own Florida fellows. So we have a section that we have that people were kind enough to share their package, so that, again, it's not to compare yourself. Well, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. It's more like, I liked how they organized this. I liked how they, tied the colors and made it easy. You want to make it easier for any juror, regardless of the awards. You want to make it easy for the juror to follow your story. If the most important thing shows up on page 40, you've lost them. Because you had another 39 pages to engage them. So use those as examples to kind of help you, inspire you. I mean, we're not needing to reinvent the wheel, we're just making the wheel better.
Tell us about time. How do you know if it's the right time are you ready? That's always the question. I don't know if I'm ready. So
Sounds like, are you ready for kids? How do you know when you're ready for kids?
It's a terrible example, because the answer is always no. You have no idea what you're getting into.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't think you ever do know.
I don't think you ever know. I think in the term for fellowship, I could say it helps that let's say you've gotten design awards. If you're going for a practice management, which is object 2, if you do a lot of technology kind of things, I led the Institute. If you start to getting awards, then you start to see that you have a package. There's a certain individual that Joyce and I know, and a lot of you may know, out of Tampa, who I want to be her when I grow up, and I'll put her out in the spot because Gloria Cloder does so much that, she's more than ready. But, you start to see all the things that you have. And that's why keeping, even if it's a running list that you type, once a 6 months, what did I do this year? You start to see what you've done. And that's when you start to see that, okay, I am ready. Not only do I make the basic component, I've been registered for 10 years and a member in good standing. And the word good standing means you've paid your dues. That's all it means. Then but this applies to any other awards, if you've collected that data.
Yeah, I think that, that's all very important. I think for me, I had just come back from England, and I literally had only been involved with AIA for not even like 8 or 9 years. And already people were coming up to me and said, "You're going to do fellowship, right?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm only just starting, like, getting involved. This is for the people that have been involved for 20, 30 years. And they were like, no, you're already president. You're ready to do this. And so I literally waited till almost to the day, 10 years, and I applied immediately after I had been an active member of the AIA. I had joined the AIA before I went to England, but it had sort of, I put myself on international status, so none of that counted while I was away for 15 years. And so when I came back, and then it was 10 years, And I had paid my dues for 10 years, and people were just saying it to me, kind of not expecting it, but because I was very involved at state level. And they were saying, You're going to do this, right? And wasn't this something you would think about? And it wasn't me that thought about it. It was them putting the idea in my head. And so I think that that's very important to listen to your colleagues, especially if they're people that have fellowship, because they recognize in you something that is definitely worth being considered for this, for fellowship. And I mean, that goes for all the awards too. I mean, even, the gold medal. I mean, you don't know when you're ready, but you can hear it a lot from other people. I know, Lourdes, I don't think you felt you were ready for the gold medal, but you were kind of like, well, I'm seeing other people win this gold medal, and other people are telling me it's time to do my gold medal. And so, that's what happened to me for fellowship, right? And so I just think it's
I think
listen
that
to the
Joyce is
people
right.
that are around
Listen,
you.
listen to the people around you, because the people
Yeah,
around you that know
for
you
sure.
well have seen what you're doing, and then you start to see some of them are getting these awards, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I've done as much, sometimes
Yeah.
more, but or sometimes
Yeah.
less. And so then why shouldn't I give it a try? Why shouldn't I kind of put my foot
And I
out
think
there?
then that's an interesting point. Like, you think as you see these people win awards, and you think, well, I've done that. I've done similar, but I've done differently. And you think, oh, that's when you begin to see, like, oh, maybe there's a different route for me to get there. But I've kind of achieved all those things. And I kind of feel as women, we expect ourselves to be perfect before we get to apply for these awards. And I can promise you the boys aren't thinking that. Okay. They're just thinking, okay, I'm going to do this because I'm ready. And they're not seeing, like, they don't think the way we do. We always wait until we feel we're ready. And so I encourage you all to be confident, to ask the questions, and not to be afraid. And another thing, when you're thinking about an award and you think that maybe you could be a good candidate, I would contact the people that have received that award in the past. And, everybody wants to talk about, the award they won, and just say, can you tell me, like, you've done this, and I'm aware that you've got it for this reason. Do you think because I did X, Y, and Z, do you think I would be, um, qualified for this award, so that they can encourage you? I mean, everybody likes to help when it comes to this kind of thing. Don't be afraid.
Don't be
Definitely don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to say, hey, here, this is what I have. Do you mind critiquing it? I know that we try to encourage that in the fellows in Florida. If you're submitting, let us know. And when I was the rep, I would find somebody who didn't know you and say, please look at it, because of course the jury doesn't know you, right? So that's the best person to look at it. They don't know you, and to say, okay, that's really telling the story, or and we're kind. We're not going to say, oh my God, this is terrible, start over. Sometimes that happens, but not my group of friends would do that. And if they do it, they'll give you constructive criticism. Make sure we're happy to help. We're here to, we all rise together. And so it's important to not be afraid to ask for help and opinions.
Yeah.
Shadi had a question about, what if you're all over the place? Then you just sort of have to go and say, how many more of all over the place do I have in this category, and pick that one,
Yeah.
because
mean,
we are not all pigeonholes, and that was.
Yeah, we're not. And when I did my fellowship, I kind of did it on a threefold like basis. I did design, and and then I did like the communicating value, and then I did my leadership in AIA for fellowship. And I put myself in one category, and because I sort of didn't know, even though I had asked other people and they helped me and they said, okay, this is your category. After they reviewed my application, the jury actually came back and said, we reviewed your package, but we just have a question. Would you be willing to switch your category to whatever category X? I don't even remember. And I was like, well, Is there any consequence? Do I have to wait till next year? And they were like, no, we're just asking you if you're willing to change that. And sure enough, they were asking me because they felt I was a better candidate in another category. And so I had gotten it wrong, but they helped me to get it right because they felt what I did show them was worthy of fellowship, but they felt it should be in a different category. So you don't always get it right. Okay. But
And I got it wrong too, and I was her sponsor, so you know. And it depends on the jury. The
Yeah.
jury I was on last year, I don't know that they would have done that. I don't,
Yeah.
you know.
And I don't know if they would have. And
It just
yeah.
depends on the group of people that you
Yeah.
have, you know, how they look at it, you know, sometimes. And this applies, I guess, for design awards. I know there's some people interested in design awards, and I want to make sure we talk about that. That, you know, sometimes the project that they love, they were like, okay with, it's the same package the next year, and the next year loves it, jury. So, you know, I don't know, Brooke, if we want to spend a little time on some
Yeah, so
design awards.
the jury is always changing both for the design and honor awards. It's not the same mix or makeup from year to year to year. So I think I've heard people that have applied to the fellowship and they've applied and reapplied several years, and it's because a different group is going to have a different discussion. It's a different makeup. I've also seen on the design award side, there was a project that applied for test of time in our chapter, and the jury didn't think that it was worthy of that award. So they didn't give it an award. And then that same project applied for the same award for AIA Florida and did receive the award. So different jury, different thing. And it's not that one is, you know, it is or it's not. It's each jury is going to look at it differently. The discussions amongst the jury members is going to make a decision whether it is or it is not worthy of an award. So it's not a failure, it's open to interpretation. So let's I want to go back and talk about bumps along the road, but let's make sure that we do cover the design awards because I see that we're over halfway through our time. So the first one is review the process from beginning to end of the design award. So when you consider or initially decide, okay, I want to submit this project for a design award, what is that? Walk us through that process of once you make that decision, what do you start doing? What's the work?
The first thing you do after you get your package is you read the instructions and you follow the instructions. Because if you don't follow the instructions, there's a good chance you're going to be disqualified. So you can make minor changes once you're comfortable. You can kind of break the rules a little bit, but basically listen to what they say, especially when you're first starting out and you don't know how, you know, the jury's going to perceive you. Because some juries that I've been on, have just been like, we don't care how you present it. And other ones are like, they didn't do that, like out. They didn't even get shortlisted to be reviewed. So that's the most important thing, I feel. And then I think immediately you need to understand yourself, the story you're going to tell about your building. And so you have to write your story very quickly. And I always do a storyboard, just like the PowerPoint. I just go through and I do like write on a piece of paper. I put in 20 slides and I just occupy each slide. And I say, how am I going to tell this story? And what is it that I want to talk about? I always feel that your drawings and your photographs are much more important than the words, even though they always ask you at the beginning to do a paragraph about what the project is about and where you're headed. That paragraph is very, very important and should be incredibly well written, grammatically correct, no spelling errors, because what happens is nobody reads the words. They look at everything first. They go through and they look at the images because that's who we are as architects. We look at the images first. And then once we need to understand, or we need some insight into what the images didn't tell us, that's when we go back and read the words. And those words better tell the story then at that point. So I'm all about words, okay? Getting them right at the beginning and then definitely following through with the images, whether it's the plans, the elevations, diagrams. And as always, the photographs that you do use, I won't use anything less than a professional photograph. I mean, I only like worst case scenario, do I ever put in an iPhone photo? I mean, we get our projects that we feel are worthy of an award. We invest in them and we get proper photographs done. And I think that makes a big difference to the jury, that they see that you've invested in yourself and what you feel is good. And those photographs never go.
It's
They
never a
never
waste
go.
of money. It's never a waste of money.
It's never a waste of money. You can always use them for something else, whether it's social media, publications. People ask for, have you done something like this? To give them a proper photograph and to have them filed properly in your office so it's easy to get to them. It's never lost on either the jurors or the public.
And I've heard jurors go, oh my God, I wish they had done a better job of photographing this.
Yeah.
Because we think there's something there, but the
Yeah.
quality of the photograph was not there. So as
Yeah.
Joy says, it's worth, spending the dollars, because it's not a waste of money. You use it for marketing, for social media, for presentation. It's
Yeah.
constant. I mean, we're using photographs that we paid for years ago. We use them still to this day, because the quality was good. So it still looks,
Yeah.
like it meant to look back. in the
You have to think, these are professionals that are looking at your work. I mean, these aren't like, grandma and grandpa looking at these. These are your peers, and they demand excellence just like you demand excellence. So your presentation has to be clean and sharp and not too wordy and not full of crap. I mean, it wants to be a really easy story that, you get a maximum of 20 slides on design awards. So you got to tell your story in those 20 slides. So be brief and succinct, but good.
Okay,
Kathy,
what about
Go for it.
if you're doing an unbuilt project? I don't know if either of you have submitted for an unbuilt project versus, so you don't have the photographs of it's been designed, it's been constructed, and it's in use and it's occupied and it's serving the purpose intent. So how would you approach an unbuilt project or a not yet built project differently?
So for us, I usually find that those submissions are much shorter. Having had the privilege of being on a jury, I also know that a lot of jurors don't like to give unbuilt awards. They may because they've been asked, but sometimes they're reluctant. So that happens more often than you would think, that they do it, but they're reluctant. So in those, you have to know that it's not just a good design or pretty pictures, renderings of what you're going to do, but you have to use your images to, like a lot of what's really important is more than plans and elevations, but the diagram of what it is you're trying to sell to your jury. Like it has to be so clear and concise what's going on here. And it can't just be in your mind. You can't just think, oh, I think this is a good design. What you want to do is like say, is this a community project? Will this benefit the community? Is it a sustainable project? Is there something about this that I've done differently that when this building gets built, it's going to be better than the rest of them? Those are the things jurors are looking for. And, innovations in your design are always, those are the ones that get the attention, and they can be small. They don't have to be big. They can be small, but you want more than just, it's like anything, you got to be more than a pretty face. You've got to have substance behind your unbuilt. And I feel that's really important in unbuilt awards. If a juror is going to take you seriously and want to give you an award for unbuilt, then it should have substance behind it.
And having sat as a chair of several attendees and juries, I think Joyce is right. The unbuilt, sometimes they look at them with a lot more critical
Yeah.
eye. because
It's
since
not
it's
built.
unbuilt, they don't know if it's really gonna do what it says it's gonna do. So the process becomes very important. How did you get there? Because it's not tested, right? So you haven't quite, shown that through the build, but it's both built and unbuilt, and it's more than a pretty picture. I think Joyce's comments of, is it for the community? Is it sustainable? Applies to both sets of, because
It does.
I have seen beautiful projects that I totally think the jury's gonna get them built. Give them an award and the jury goes, yeah, but how is that any different from the house next door, right? That looks, just as fun and exciting. So our jurors, our fellow architects are wanting to see the envelope pushed, not envelope pushed to change it for change purposes, but for something that makes a difference and makes an impact. And we're architects, we are magic doing smoke and mirrors. I warn you, our jurors are the same. We recognize smoke and mirrors because
Yeah.
that's what we do. We sell our clients something, and sometimes we are just BSing off the top of our head. Trust me, the juror sees it right off.
They do. They can see right
They
through.
can see the smoke and mirror, that there's no depth, because we would recognize it ourselves. So
Yeah. And I think, Nadi, you're asking the question here, how do you decide or how do you determine which project to pick for your submittal? I think it's really understanding that criteria beyond the design. It's just like fellowship, how is this making an impact, this design? Because yeah, I don't know if some of you know this, that once you're president, the next year you get to be the chair of the state design awards. And so you get to go and be in the room. You don't get to say anything, okay, about the design awards but you're just there with the jurors and you're listening. And when I went, I got to go to London, and it was such a joy to take the Florida projects to London, because I was nervous. These were my colleagues, and these are really, really good architects that are working globally. And I'm bringing Florida's project, a little bit kind of hesitant. They were blown away by the quality of the work that we produce in this state. And so that's what I learned so well about what's happening in Florida. We're a really good, we have high design here and good design. And now, our design in Florida is really looking at how it impacts the community and sustainability, resiliency, and so on. So I think that those would be the criteria that I would suggest. Look at your projects and see how they're impacting design.
So as being not on the jury, but as an observer to the jury or the liaison, what is something that you either saw or experienced that you kind of filed away and said, wow, I never thought about that or considered it, but a little observance from a jury? I know, Lourdes, when you were past president, it was Panama, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so what little tidbit would you like to share? Because I think it's interesting when you're not participating, but you're observing and you have to keep your mouth silent.
Yeah.
So that was my second visit, because the year before I had gone with Barcelona, but when I was the chair, that jury in Panama was very engaged about that story, right? How, and I had never thought of it that way, and I have to remind myself, because I say that for fellowship, I say that for honor awards, what's your story? But I don't necessarily think of it as the story for our design. And that's something that I saw some projects that they thought, this is a great project, and then they took it the next step. Did it really make a difference? Could this have been designed for any other city and would have made a difference in that city? And then they backed themselves out of giving the awards, because they're like, how is it this particular project happens to be more sort of a larger context of a city, and they're like, it's a beautiful design, but I could plant it anywhere. Sure, who's trying to
Interesting.
chase me down. I keep
Yeah.
ignoring them. And they're like, no, and I was like, wow. And they loved it. They thought it was a beautiful design, but they were like, it could go anywhere. It
Yeah.
could go in the middle of
Agreed.
the desert or it could go in the middle of, there was no, so how do you tell that story? How do you tie it to its context? How do you tie it to the buildings around it? Something we think of, but we don't always necessarily follow through or forget about because we're so focused in our little plan and our little site plan, and we forget the macro, where does it sit and what does it do to the community? And that was really, for me, impactful.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I remembered when I do it, but
I think for me, the most interesting thing is like when a juror is, when the jury is given whatever, let's say local awards, you get 50 awards, and then at state level, you get 250 awards. And then you can imagine, it gets higher and higher every year. And then you go to national and there's so many awards being submitted, is like how quickly the jury has to go through initially, like how fast they weed things out. So that's why I'm suggesting, like, don't start with slide number 1, start with a storyboard and put your story together like quickly so that you realize, oh, this is how I'm going to get to the end. This is how I'm going to capture their attention. I'm going to put my best image first, and I'm going to put my best image last, and I'm going to keep my words short, and I'm going to be very graphic and very clear because they will weed you out so fast. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, nobody has that much time to read or look at everything. They just go through it. So that was a very interesting part of it, I thought. So
Okay, did we get all the questions answered from the chat? Sometimes it's hard to
there's
keep
one
up.
last one. It says, what's
Okay.
the average number of times it takes to apply to be accepted for fellowship? And I don't know that they have that statistic. You can apply 3 times in a row, and if you're unfortunately don't get it, then you have to wait a year, and then it starts again. And so they do give you feedback, because the jury, we take the time to, to give advice, because you don't want to, at least my group of jurors, we didn't feel that it was right to not provide advice and how to do it better, or how to, and I know that we looked at the prior years, like they would tell us this is a 2nd-year application, and we would look at the comments. Like I didn't look at the comments that the person had before I read it so that I wouldn't be biased. Then I would look at their comments to see, well, did they follow the advice? And sometimes it'd be like, really, they told you what to do and you still didn't do it? Versus oh my God, you got it, right? You read the advice, what to focus on, and you ran with it. So they do give it to you. This year, AIA National 2024, the Design Awards Department is a little off skew. So I'm hoping that, I know there were some people who had challenges getting their comments, but I'm hoping that 2025 round of comments will be easier to access for people. And if you know somebody who applied and didn't get their comments, let me know. I will send you who to ask for them. Because I know they exist.
Brooke, there was one more question that came in through the chat, not the Q&A. It was, how thorough or deep does an independent study or speculative design thesis have to be for a design award of this category? I'm not in school anymore, so how is that judged differently from students at a university? I don't have, if you don't mind me stepping in here, someone who's also listened to several juries. I will say I just echo everything that Lourdes and Joyce have been saying. I don't have a strict answer on this, and we do like to give our jury leeway on what they do, but it is the story. If you leave any questions to the jury, we can't answer those as
shame on you.
yeah, it's the more questions you leave to the jury, then you haven't told your complete story. So that would be my advice on that. And Lourdes and Joyce, if you want to weigh in on that.
Becky probably has more advice than all of us put together because she has sat to so many of them. But she is correct. We can't answer any other questions. So it has to be all, as I was telling somebody the other day, if I have to explain the drawing to you, if I had to explain the idea, then I haven't done my job, because what if I'm not there? Which of course you're not when you're presenting to a jury. And for the studies and speculative designs, I have to admit, I was surprised how thoroughly they looked at them. I was shocked that they spend so much time on, theoretical research, at least my jury, that I was like, wow.
Yeah, they give a lot of awards
Right,
too.
yeah, and some of
Which
them
is
were
nice,
right
too.
over my head. I was like, I did not get it, but they did.
Yeah.
But they, really
Yeah,
had to.
and I think the interesting thing about going abroad to get our have our awards reviewed is that, for example, when I was there, my colleagues kept looking at me like, well, why would this be like that? And you can't say anything as, as the chair of the design awards, you're not allowed to like say anything. And then there would be presentations where I would just be pulling my hair out because I'd be like, oh my God, this is an incredible response in a Florida environment. You don't understand the context behind this, why this should be reviewed or looked at again. So, because you can't depend on somebody else to be there to tell that story. And I would feel bad because I was like, this is a great project, and it got dismissed. And whether or not they ever applied again, who knows? So, yeah.
Well, I know in the two that I've gone to, we said as little as possible, but sometimes we did explain why something, because we felt it was not fair to the project to not explain, well, why are you only using concrete? Well, because it's in Florida. It needs to be, South Florida, so every once in a while, Becky was always very good at making sure we didn't say more than we needed to, but sometimes we threw at least a minimal, just to give that project an opportunity, that it's hard to explain because, of course, everybody, and if it's judged in Florida, everybody knows why you're doing something. But she's right, that the more you answer in your presentation, the less you are leaving for the jury to sort of guess in a lot of ways.
We are about out of time, but I just wanted to share what I had heard from someone is criticism is a gift. People wouldn't give you criticism if they didn't care. And it's okay, even though it's kind of difficult to accept when someone says, I think this is really great, but I don't think you're ready to submit yet. And that's okay. It may not be there, and sometimes you have to table it and go away from it and come back and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. But it doesn't mean don't go after it, don't submit it later. It just means they want to make sure that you are successful and they're saving you. So don't be discouraged by criticism. And sometimes it's hard to accept, but it's being done out of care for you. And it's okay, but don't be derailed by it.
Yeah,
And know
because
that they're,
we're hoping you get the first time around, so that's why they're trying to help you.
yeah,
I would be remiss if I did not remind people about the legislative day, which is Tuesday, February 4th. Is that the correct date, Becky? And all of our components, last I heard, there's like 120 people or so, and she has a little slide thing,
Hold
so
on, I'm
look at
trying to
that.
get to my
Go for it.
commercial.
There you go. It's time for Becky to do her sale. Now that we have undivided attention. Go for it.
And I apologize, I'm at home, so my dog is barking. But we do have legislative day is February 4th. We do have about 130 people registered, so there's a QR code there if you can register. And then next month's Women in Architecture, thank you to Denise Basalsuega who got this together for us. We are very excited about next month's topic of closing the gender wealth gap. So if you have not signed up, please do that. We have a very good guest speaker coming. And then also convention registration is open. If you register early, you will have first dibs at tours, classes, and all the fun stuff that we do. So get registered right now. And then in March, we will have classes available and you will get first stab at choosing all of those. And of course, now that you all have some tips on entering the awards, please get registered so you can get your awards. And this is for the design and honors. And there was a comment about providing feedback to the AI Florida Awards. With the volume of design awards, we're not able to do that for every project with the design awards, but we do provide feedback for the honor awards, for the people awards. So we do try to provide feedback on those, but it's just not possible for every design award to do that. So, but yes, thank you. We will keep that in mind as we move forward.
And at convention, we do have, are we still doing it this year, a fellowship, one-on-one with other fellows?
Yes,
So,
so
and don't wait. I know Nikki last year, I think out of Tampa, you know, she obviously not ready for it. She's an associate, but she wanted to kind of get ideas. They're more than helpful to even just a regular, I mean, we're there for fellowship, but of course, if you want to ask questions about other awards that you're working on, I know we're more than happy to help.
yeah, so when you register for convention, there are a couple questions about having more information on if you're interested in a fellowship one-on-one or feedback on awards, including our Young Architect and Associates Awards. So if you answer yes to those questions, we will be following up about getting you some one-on-one time. That's my commercial.
That's
Good.
awesome. Thank you very much,
Yes.
for joining us. We looked like we had a good, nice crowd of people. Hopefully we were helpful. Please, by any means, ask us. I know I'm happy to help. I'm sure Joyce is too.
Of course.
You know, ask questions through Becky, through Brooke, through whoever. We're here to help.
Yeah,
To make sure
for sure.
more Florida people apply, for all kinds of awards, and most specifically, more women. For all awards, of any kind.
Yes.
Thank you,
Don't-
Lourdes. Thank you, Joyce. I know both of these women have mentored people that work for them, and I've interacted with several of their employees, but more importantly, they're their mentees. And you love what you do, and it shows through the people that you've touched. So thank you, and continue.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, see you next month. And see you in Tallahassee next month too.
Legislative Day first. Everyone at Legislative Day, everyone's welcome. It's great.
If you've never gone, we highly recommend it. Good night. Bye.
Bye.